Hello, everyone. Hello. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on implementing our Workplace Services Kiosk. We are so excited to have you here and share this feature with you. So today I'm going to be presenting along with Elizabeth. She's going to be showing us how the kiosk works and how it can be configured. And for those of you who have not met me yet, I'm Paulina. I'm an outbound product manager for WSC. And then before we get started with the agenda and a few housekeeping items, as always, we just like to keep our safe harbor slide, just reminding you all that everything we say is forward-looking statements, and there may be some things that are subject to change along the way. And also a good reminder to let you all know that if you scan the QR code that you see on the screen, you're going to be able to see all the webinars that are available for you through live on ServiceNow. So if you're interested in seeing what webinars are coming, I would highly encourage you to just scan the QR code on the screen and see what's coming next. Now, before we move on to the agenda, a few housekeeping items. There's going to be a Q&A segment after the presentation, so please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions throughout the session. We would also love to hear from you, so feel free to introduce yourself whenever you ask a question, or if you just want to put in the chat where you're joining us from, that would be amazing. We love to get to know you and see who's here with us. This session will also be recorded. It's going to be available on Live on ServiceNow community page a week from now. For any of you that might need to leave the session early or would just like to rewatch at any future time, you're more than welcome to refer to this website and then look at the recording there. And then lastly, after the session, there's going to be a short survey, and we would really appreciate it if you can just fill that out and share any feedback that you have with us. So now, with that being said, the agenda that we prepared for today is we're going to get started with an overview of the Workplace Services Kiosk, just sharing what it is, what are the main features for both the user and the admin. Then we're going to do a solution demonstration. We're going to talk also about how to get started, both with the visitor management experience as well as the indoor mapping experience. And as promised, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the session to answer any questions that you may have. Now, I'm going to get started talking about what the kiosk experience is overall for those of you who have not heard about it before. But basically, what our main goal with the kiosk experience is to transform the office visit with a customizable experience. And the way that we can achieve that through the kiosk is by tailoring the experience with your brand options to configure any logos, background images, the text, or the layout. You can also enable the options to instantly switch to any language, ensuring accessibility for any visitors at any location. And then you also get options like keeping the kiosk running smoothly with timeout features, such as whenever someone has not been using the kiosk for some time, it will time out and it'll take them back to the check-in or the homepage as well. Now, to start talking a little bit about what all the kiosk offers, we have a seamless check-in and self-registration as well as a checkout experience. So the check-in experience consists of four different ways now. So basically, you can either enter a passcode that was shared with you by your host, your email address, phone number, full name, and very recently, as of our May release, with a QR code as well. And another really exciting thing about the kiosk that can be done is just register unexpected visitors. So for those visitors or those employees who want to bring someone along into their workplace, but they didn't get a chance to register maybe that client or friend or person that they want to bring into the workplace, they have an option to do a self-registration within the kiosk upon arrival. So that's also available. And then similarly to the check-in experience, the checkout works the same way. There we have four ways to do it, and you can just use any of them to check out and you will be checked out of the workplace. Now, within the indoor mapping, we have several options and experiences. First, talking about the admin, we enable the admin to configure the kiosk, as I was saying earlier. However, they would like, within, of course, certain guidelines, but basically the kiosk admin can manage the position, can manage the camera, the features for each kiosk all throughout the Workplace Central. They can determine what modules will go into the kiosk, what are the options that the end user is going to be able to see, the colors, backgrounds, images, etc. And as I was saying, they can easily enable or disable any feature per kiosk. So let's say maybe an organization does not want to do a checkout procedure, they can remove that as an admin. And then for the end user experience, as I was mentioning earlier, we can tailor the interface to fit specific needs, such as the language or maybe background colors, etc. We also offer wayfinding and space details. So within the kiosk, you have the option to explore the workplace. This option is going to take you to a map that will show you the way to how to navigate the workplace. And if you maybe have a reservation or you're attending a meeting at a specific place in the workplace, this map will guide you there. Also, there's space filters and neighborhood display. So the space filter are going to allow you to see data points such as availability based on occupancy, neighborhood data or department data, however the organization decides to set this up. And then there's also an opportunity to raise any cases for assistance. So let's say someone books a space through their mobile application or their desktop, and they spend the day there. When they come out or even when they arrive, if they notice anything is wrong, they can report and raise these issues through the kiosk itself. So a lot of exciting things. And now I'm very happy to share. Elizabeth will be doing a demo for us. So I'm gonna hand it down to you, Elizabeth, to share how the kiosk works and how it can be configured.
Thank you, Paulina. Can we just stay on this slide for a few moments? I just want to mention, hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day or a great start to the day. Any of you that might have attended Knowledge this year, if you had the opportunity of attending and joining us in the meeting center, you'd have had the opportunity to actually see our kiosk in action. Our kiosk was powering the meeting center. So having that visual map that Paulina just described with the different capabilities enabled us to showcase the layout of the specific meeting room, visualizing the different spaces, looking at each space, are they occupied, not occupied? We also had the option to include sensor data in that. We equipped every single room with sensors, so that was really providing us real-time occupancy on the map. So if we needed an ad hoc meeting room because the meeting was not planned, we could easily just go and leverage that map and get to a right space that we could utilize. That map was also used for wayfinding capabilities. We could easily just select a space and directly get directions to it if we didn't know where it was. We could open a case against it. We could also see a certain amount of information based on air quality, temperature. We really enabled a lot of those capabilities, not specifically for visitor registration, but really for that visualization of the map, enabling our internal employees, but also any customer, partner, a visitor that was in the meeting room to be able to see the different occupancy status. So thanks, Paulina, for sharing that. I'm now going to take over the screen and we've spoken to all the different experience, but what we want to do now is really show you what that experience could look like. So what we've done is configure an instance. I'm just going to shut my camera off just in case it interferes. So we've configured an instance with every possible option of being able to set up the specific kiosk. So what you're looking at right now is, imagine this as a kiosk. This could be an iPad. This could be a full-blown kiosk like you saw in the images before. It could be an Android device. Anything that's got a web browser can actually support this page. So what we have here is a fully branded ServiceNow kiosk. Let's put it that way. We have defined the background. We've defined our logo. We've defined the different modules that can appear here. So we've not only included the visitor management portion of enabling visitors to come and check in, check out, self-register. We also have that map component to it. So it's really up to your organization on how you want to configure it. And we'll go through the different steps in a few minutes to really understand how we can configure these different options. So what I want to start off by doing is showing you the process of a self-registration. So you're probably familiar with the check-in, check-out if you've joined previous webinars. We usually go through those flows, and we had a webinar last week on some of our highlights on the May release. So if you haven't seen that, I definitely recommend going to check it out. But having said that, I'm going to start kicking it off with that self-registration. So what I'm going to do, I'm a visitor that's just walked up to the kiosk. I need to check in. I'll figure out that I haven't been invited. So I'm going to kick off that flow to do the self-registration. So as Paulina mentioned, we have different options for authentication. Right now, this is every single option we have out of the box. Of course, you can really define which ones you want to have, and we'll also go through that as we go through the implementation portion. What I'm going to do right now is go and sign in via my name, but I could also do email. Let's do email to change it up a bit. So what I'm going to do is input my email. So let's do alison.russell at abc.com. I'm going to continue. I'm going to say, oh, you've not been invited. I haven't been pre-registered. If I would have been pre-registered, so my host would have registered me through visitor management, it would have showed up, it would have recognized me. I could have moved on to the next step, but here I haven't been seen. So what I can do is kick off that flow for the self-registration. So what I'm going to do is register my visit. I'm going to go through the same questions that would have been input by my host if they had pre-registered me. So I'm just going to say I am a family or friend. I'm going to continue. What is my name? My name's Alison. Continue. What's my last name? Russell. I'm going to continue. My company name, this is optional, but I can put it in as ABC. Email address, as I started the process, it's captured that and I don't have to fill it out again, so I can automate that part of it. I'm going to continue. I can enter a phone number, but this is also optional, so I'm just going to pass. And then I'm going to select the host. So this, right now we have it open to every single employee within the organization in this specific location. But of course, this can really be defined by your organization of, I only want to limit it to 3 people. I don't want anyone coming into my organization seeing all my employee names. I can really define who should be shown here. Of course, if you've got a big organization, you don't want any visitor coming in and saying, yeah, my host is going to be the CEO of the organization. You can really define who will be shown in this list they can select from. So let's just select the first one just for the purpose of the demo and continue. Reason for my visit, let's just say family day in office. And I'm going to continue. It's going to give me this recap of all the information I input. I can edit anything if I see anything is incorrect, and then I can continue and move on to the next step. As part of our May release, this is a brand new capability. The kiosk can now enable the front camera and take a picture. So this picture will be stored on my visitor record. It could then be used if I want to print it as part of the badge. I can do multiple actions. So if I'm a visitor, I've got the option I can skip it or I can continue, and it's going to open the camera of my device. So I can just take a quick picture. There we go. Let's not look at that too long. We've seen it's a great picture. Amazing, wonderful. Let's move on to the next step. Then my organization has specific policies. You can have this really defined based on the kiosk and based on the location. Maybe in your organization, you've got different types of locations. Maybe you've got an office space, you've got got laboratories, you've got kind of secret locations where they need to sign an NDA, sign really strict policies. So you can really define all of this per location. So if I was a visitor that had been pre-registered, I'd have received also this via email. But right now, since I'm doing a self-registration, I also need to comply to these specific policies. So I have the option we've got 2 different options. With the May release, we included the option to have an actual signature pad, so I could actually sign on the kiosk directly. This will also be captured. Or if you don't want to enable this capability, you can also just have the acknowledge button to acknowledge those policies. Once I've done this, this will be what we call the end page, so giving me a recap of what my next steps, what action am I then meant to go and complete. So it's going to notify me that, okay, the host has been notified, they're on their way. It's telling me also to go to the reception because they're printing the badge for me. And it's giving me that quick trigger to say, don't forget to check out when you leave, and then I can complete that. As Paulina said, if I just leave it to this page, walk away, go and do something else, after a few seconds, you can define the time specifically of when it times out. It will revert back to the first page. So similar, if I'd started the process of check-in, I'd put my email address, I'd put my phone number, and then I get pulled away to do something else. We don't want that screen to actually stay for the next visitor. So we want to make sure we're calculating how many seconds we would expect and then revert back to this home page. So right now that was the check-in flow. The checkout flow is exactly the same on this instance. I would just go in and have those same options. Let's just click into it. I would have those same options to identify myself and then check out in a quick 2-step process. Again, you can define specifically what way of authentication do you want to have here. And you can also say, well, we don't require checkout, so we don't want actually that button to be shown on kiosk. What I'm going to do is go back to the home screen so we can look at the home screen. One of the things I forgot to mention is if your organization is located in different countries, you might have some countries where you will have visitors from the entire world that speak different languages. You also have the option here to select what language the kiosk is in. So this one is only English, but you would have the option to say, I can have it in Spanish, I want it in French, I want it available for different kinds of visitors. Having said all of that, I'm now going to move on to the part around the Explore Workplace. So as a reminder, this is showing you all the capabilities that are available on Kiosk. This does not mean you need to have every single one of these. You can really pick and choose and define your own Kiosk experience. So moving on to the Explore Workplace portion of things, this is going to open up my indoor map, so the location of where the specific kiosk is located. So I can really see the actual layout of my organization. If you're setting this kiosk up for your employees only, you might want to have a lot of detail. If you're setting it up for employees and visitors, you might not want your visitors to see all the information. All of the map can be configured within Map Studio. There's a specific view that can be utilized saying, I only want to see coffee rooms, canteen, and waiting area. I don't want them to see the details of, they don't need to know where the fire extinguisher is. They don't need to know where the meeting rooms are. They just need specific data. You can configure all of that as you build out the map and have that tied to this experience. So just for the purpose of this, we've enabled everything on this specific kiosk, and I'm going to show you a couple of the capabilities. If you're familiar with the location directory within Workplace Service Delivery, this is a very similar experience as it provides the different capabilities as that location directory does. So first of all, I can see my kiosk, so it's been located. I know precisely the kiosk is located here. I can select any kind of room on this specific floor plan. Let's say I want to look at Sydney Harbour. I can get my small image, understand what kind of equipment's in there, the seating. Again, if it's available for visitors, you might not want them to see that. You might only want them to see the restrooms, but for the purpose, I'm really going to detail this. So let's say I want to get to the specific meeting rooms. I want to get directions. It's always going to take into account my starting point. The starting point will always be pre-filled with the kiosk. So I'm starting from the kiosk, so it really helps guide me to my specific location. Keeping in mind, I'm a visitor. I might not know the layout of my office space, so I really need to understand how to get to that location. And of course, we have both the capability of having by default, but let's say I needed to go to a space on the second floor, I could also have the accessible mode. That would take me via elevators instead of stairs, and different ways to make sure that I can really get to the location if I need any accessible friendly way. So having shown that, I also want to say, okay, I'm going to this meeting room, but on my way, I go via this specific phone booth. I see there's a paddle on the floor in front of it. I want to raise an issue. I could just go back to the kiosk. If I'm an employee, of course, I could do this on the phone. But if I'm a visitor, maybe I also want to make sure that the cleaning team is aware of it so I can really detail it, define the urgency. And of course, here you could have, if I'm an employee, I could select myself from the list. But if you deliver this experience to visitor, you might only want to have one persona here that is a visitor, and then they can log everything as that specific persona. And so that's just going to generate a case and go through the case management flow and build on that application. So I'm just now going to move on to some more capabilities we have here. So we're seeing floor 1. If I want to say I need to look at floor 2 because I know as I mentioned when I did my self-registration, I'm friends and family. So I know this kind of office, but I'm not too sure. I've been told to go and meet someone on floor 2. I'm not too sure where that is. I can actually look at floor 2. I can see the different buildings that are available to me and get directions to these different floors. So let's say I want to switch to floor 2. I could just easily move to floor 2 and then select a space and get directions to this location. And again, it will always take into consideration my starting point, which is at that kiosk. I could have a second kiosk on this floor that would provide me with that I am here if I'm looking directly at that kiosk, but that is up to you to configure the different locations of where you want to place kiosks. So if I just go back to my floor 1, we also have a lot of capabilities in terms of making the map a lot clearer. So I believe this is really mainly focused on your employee persona, or this could be a contractor that is familiar with the location and they need to take several actions, but really need to simplify the map to be able to understand and find what they're looking for. So we have a different set of filters. Again, everything has been enabled here so that you can visualize it. But of course, as you set up your kiosk, the admin has full rights in terms of what is made available to the people actually using the kiosk. We have the option to display neighborhoods. So this is going to display my different neighborhoods. I might want a bit more detail of what neighborhood am I specifically looking at. And I could just drop down and look at my different neighborhoods. Let's say I only want to look at my customer support. Where are they located? I could easily just get that on the map. Of course, this is a demo instance, so really just providing you the high level of what could be achieved. So looking at my neighborhoods, I could also say, I want to look, I'm arriving at the office. I haven't had the chance. I was in the car, haven't had chance to make a reservation on my desktop or my phone. I can't do it directly today from kiosk. But what I can do is if I'm coming late, I really need to take a call somewhere, I really need to book a meeting space, I could just walk up to the kiosk, display the reservable status and get that information, what space is available, what space is booked, really get that information. And on top of that, if my organization has set up occupancy sensors to really tell me real time, even though it's reserved, it might be available because no one is actually there, I could really add on top of that my different occupancy status. So that, of course, requires to have the workplace connectors and occupancy sensors actually enabled to be able to visualize that. Once I've done all of that, I also have the option to look at my space filters. So right now I'm looking at a different bunch of different place types. I've got meeting rooms, I've got fire extinguishers, I've got restrooms. I really want to simplify it. I only want to find restrooms, really simplify it to me. I want to find the women's restrooms. How do I get there? So what I can do is just simply select a specific space type, and that will really simplify the map for me and just give me what I'm looking for. So that really helps guide me through my experience on the kiosk. And again, once I've done all of that, I might have enabled every single possibility, all the filters here. So the map is clear to me, but someone behind me that wants to then use the kiosk, it might not be clear to them. Again, you can have that trigger of saying after 30 seconds when no one has actually touched the device, it should revert back automatically to that homepage. So that is an overview of what our kiosk capabilities can do today. And what I'm going to do now is then move on to how can we actually configure some of these capabilities. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again. Here we go. So to set up the kiosk experience, what we need to understand is what is the workplace service delivery kiosk. So what we've done is a dedicated interface where we can have and actually have it enabled on every type of device. So as you saw, it's a web browser. So anything that's got a web browser like an iPad, an Android device, a kiosk that runs on a browser, any type of device, recommend for it to have it tactile, otherwise the experience is kind of lost because visitors, employees won't be able to interact with it. But the idea is that it can be made available on any kind of device. We've also enabled this device to be fully branded and multilingual. So really having it designed to the brand image that you have, because if you think of the visitor experience, it's always the visitor comes in, that's one of the first things they see at the reception is the brand image. So you want to make sure that your kiosk is not standing out amongst the reception. You want to make sure that it's branded, that it's showing a good image of your organization. Having the option to have it in multi-languages, we have a lot of organizations that work globally, making sure we're catering for every kind of visitor. Based on what languages we have our platform in, we can make sure that that is available to them. Highly configurable because we've got different ways of setting up the kiosk. As I mentioned, you can have different kiosks in one single building. You could have even different kiosks in one single floor. Let's say example of that could be, I want a kiosk set up for my visitors, so that would be on the first floor by the reception, but I also want one for my employees to take more action. I want them to see the occupancy sensors, full detail on the map. I want that on the second floor, so that I don't want to have the visitor experience on that. I only solely want the map. So really making it configurable as to how the organization wants it. At the same time, configuration is also in the terms of how do I want to set up the experience? So the different flows. Do I want to enable my visitors to come and walk up, check in with a QR code in a simple way? Do I want them always ways to input their email address to really verify that part? How do I want to set that up? This is extremely configurable, and that we'll go through in detail. And then lastly, we're making sure that our kiosk is really utilizing applications we have within Workplace Service Delivery. So the applications we'll be discussing today as part of the configuration will mainly be the kiosk. So this is a separate application. We have the visitor management application, the indoor mapping application that will provide that mapping experience. And as you saw on that map experience, we have the option to raise a case. So that will be utilizing workplace case management. So those will be the main applications we'll be discussing today. So moving forward, in terms of roles, terms of how do we configure the kiosk, this is going to get started on the part of how do we actually implement it. First of all, we have 3 specific roles for the kiosk. So we have one, the kiosk admin. So the kiosk admin, as most admin terminology in ServiceNow, is going to be the one in the back end configuring the different options for the kiosk, the different pages, the different modules, and how is the kiosk actually going to operate. We then have the kiosk operator. The kiosk operator, what they do is take all the configuration that's been done on the instance and bind that with a physical kiosk. So making sure the configuration that's made in the backend is actually made available on a specific kiosk. And then last but not least, we have a kiosk viewer, which will be either a physical person's account or a virtual person's account that you actually create and give them entitle them to that role. And that is really going to enable that experience that you were seeing of delivering that experience on the kiosk. So you could have one kiosk viewer that is logged into every single kiosk you have throughout your organization. Or if you want to look in terms of security, you could have one kiosk viewer per building. So this is not meaning that you need to have extra licenses for any of this. This is really saying that you have one person that has a kiosk viewer role logged in, and that provides the experience for everyone. So we're not counting visitors that are logging in. We're not counting employees that are looking at the map. This is only providing them the experience that anyone can utilize, and that was not costing for extra licenses. I just want to make sure that part was clear because that question comes back quite a bit. Moving on, so now looking at how do we actually configure this experience. So the branding part is a key part, and that is where we recommend to get started, is really configuring what would be a homepage. So what you can do is create different homepages, but if you want to make sure you've got unity between the way that you set up your kiosk throughout your locations, you could create one single homepage kiosk. So for this homepage, you're going to give it a name. So as I said, you can create multiple. So you can give it different names. That's not going to be shown anywhere. That is only for the kiosk admin to kind of know which homepage he's creating. It could be different per country, it could be different per region, it could be different by location. You could create multiple ones of these. What is going to be shown is the title. So what you saw on that demo, the title we had was the welcome. You could have any kind of message there, a way to attract someone's eye, a visitor's eye, to really know that they can take action on that. You can have whatever kind of title there. You also have the subtitle, which is listed just below the title, which kind of asks the person in front of the kiosk to take action. So saying, please check in, or use this kiosk to get more information, or you could put any kind of sentence, but that is usually what we use to kind of get the person in front of the kiosk to trigger an action and get something done. So kind of informing them that they can use that device. We then have the logo, so I'm not going to define that because everyone knows what that logo is. And then the background image, that is what we see on the example as the purple color. So you can really have it with the image of your organization. You could have a specific picture. You could have employees. You could change it up based on the celebration of the months. You could really define it how you want to have it defined. So really that is the first part of setting up the homepage. Once you've defined your homepage, what you're then going to do is create different kiosk configuration. So a kiosk configuration will be a configuration that is specific to a kiosk. So what you're going to define here is the name of it. So right now, in the example, I've created the Italy kiosk. I'm using the homepage that I just defined. So that's the one with the logo, the name, the title, and the background, really specific to that location. I'm then really going to define who can manage it. So who's going to be entitled, who's going to have the role to bind the configuration to the actual physical device when we come to that step. I'm then going to define on this specific kiosk configuration, where is it going to be located? It could be anything within your location hierarchy. So it could be a specific building, it could be a specific space, it could be a specific floor. You can really define what location it gets tied to. And then, of course, you'll be setting up the default language. As I mentioned, you can have multiple languages, but you do have to select that default one that will be shown all the time on that device. So going through that, I'll just go back just to talk to this image so that is the kiosk configuration is the part at the top. What we're then going to need to do is kiosk module configuration. Kiosk module configuration is really configuring the different buttons, if we want to put it in less technical words, the different buttons that will be shown on my kiosk. So what I'm going to do next is configure these different kiosk modules. So the different buttons that will be shown on my screen. Just to follow through with the demo I did, what I'm going to discuss right now is setting them up for every single one of the options. But of course, you'll repeat these different ones if you want to add more. If you don't want to add them all, you can really define that. So to have those 3 different buttons on my kiosk, I've created 3 different modules. For the visitor experience, I created one for the check-in, check-out, and for the indoor mapping experience, I created one that is linked to the indoor mapping, and I have called it Explore Workplace. It could be Explore Campus, it could be Open Map, it could be any. You could really name it, and that's what will be shown on your kiosk buttons. And to define these, you'll give it a name. So that name will not be shown. That will be an internal name. The title that will be shown on the kiosk. And then you also have to tie into an entry point, making sure you've got where would that information be going. So these are the configuration of the buttons. But of course, to configure these buttons, you then need to configure the flows. So once that visitor, that employee clicks on the button, what flow should be kicked off? What should happen next? So to do that, what I'm going to do is separate it in two parts. We're going to start with the visitor management, and then we'll go into the indoor mapping portion. So starting with the visitor management portion, we're going to discuss how to actually set up the different flows. So what is going to be behind each of those buttons? And what I want to start off with showing is exactly every different step that we went through in the demo to really show you what can be done. But of course, all of these are not mandatory. These can be optional based on what you want to do. So I'll really show you what is mandatory to be completed. So as part of this flow, what I'm going to do is define the name of the flow. So right now we're looking at a check-in flow and how do I want the step-by-step to actually happen. So I'm going to need to configure an authentication page. So the authentication page is really how is my visitor going to log in? So have they been pre-registered? How are they going to identify when they walk up to the kiosk? We'll see the different options in a minute. Do I want to enable self-registration is the next. So this is not mandatory. You could have strict policies to say you have to be pre-registered to enter my location. So we don't accept self-registration. They have to go via the reception or we don't authorize them, whatever the case. This can really be defined. But this could say you've got one kiosk in one building, which is your workplace. You allow self-registration, but you've got a lab, which is really secure, where you don't allow it. So you'll have two different configurations. That is totally possible. You'll then have the acknowledgement page. So this is really the page linked to the policies. So again, totally optional. Do you want to have your visitors complete policies, sign policies before they are able to check in? This is up to you to have available or not. You then have the option to take a picture. So as I showed you, this was part of our latest release in May, having the option to take a picture and then include that later on in the badge printing when the receptionist configures that template. So that is totally optional to have it active or not active. If you've got a device that doesn't have a front camera, you can remove that. So it doesn't even show the option that the employee has to, the visitor has to skip. You then have that summary page, so really giving me the detail of who am I coming to see, what is the purpose of my visit, and clarify my identity. And then we have the end page. So the end page were those triggering actions of what should happen next. So I should walk over to the receptionist, it's reminding me to check out. I can define what activity will happen on that page. So having gone through all of that, I'm now going to go into more specifics of the authentication process. So part of the demo, I showed you a quick overview of what it would look like to have every single one of those methods enabled on the kiosk, but you have the option to configure whichever one you want, and you can limit it to only certain or only have one if you have a really secure organization. So we have the option to check in via email. So that's just inputting someone's email. The QR code functionality. So the QR code is new in our May release. This gets sent out as soon as a visitor gets pre-registered. So if I know someone is coming to my workplace tomorrow, I can pre-register with the visitor management component. I can say they're invited to a reservation or just invite them for the day to the workplace. And with that, they will receive an email with the QR code that they can then have on their phone in their emails, walk up to the kiosk, have that camera scan the QR code that will then check them in. In that same in that similar way, as part of that email, there's also a passcode that gets generated. So this passcode has been around for slightly longer, so they could either use the passcode that is on that email or the QR code, or you could decide not to have those part of those triggered to the visitor. There's also the option to check in by the name. This one could be slightly more complex if you're in locations where quite a few people might have the same name, surname, so that might be a bit tricky, but we do have that option for them to sign it. And of course, we have the phone number. So if someone wants to check in with the phone number and capture that information, they can do so. So that is the authentication page. The other page that was mandatory is the end page. So what actions should be triggered? What should we be telling the visitor to do after they've completed their check-in process? So out of the box, we've got 3 different options that are available, but of course you can define whatever one you'd like to include in that. What we have got is telling them to go to the receptionist. Receptionist might want to check the passport to really validate it. that it's them before giving them a specific card. It could be a physical card, it could be a badge that gets printed for them. We also need to let them know that their host is on the way. So you could have that message saying, we've notified your host, please stay by the kiosk. And then lastly, what we have out of the box is the option to let them know, give them a reminder that our organization also wants to make sure we don't only have the information on who's in the workplace, but we also need to know who's checked out. So we also want to trigger them to make sure when they come out of the workplace that before they leave, they come and do that checkout process. So you could really define that and then also define the order in which those should appear. Moving on to that portion is that now that we have the buttons, we created those buttons in that first step. We then created the different flows, what should happen when someone clicks on check-in. What we then need to do is combine both of those together. So when a visitor clicks on the check-in button, what flow should happen? So we need to link those both together. So what we're going to do is look at our kiosk module. We're going to look and identify the configuration flow. So right now we're still looking at check-in. So there's a specific flow that has been configured. It's going to do a bit of searching, check if that flow exists. You can also add some conditions to it to really make sure it is only retrieving one single value. You need to make sure there's only one record. Once that is done, you can say that your button is then linked to your flow. So once a visitor will click on that check-in button, you know that the flow that the way that we've set it up here is that they will either check in if they're pre-registered or self-register because we've enabled that option. If we don't enable that option, of course, they won't be able to self-check in and they will just, you could have a message for them to go to the reception to self-check in. You could really define it. But the way we've set it up is they could either self-check in or self-register. And this process you're going to do for every single variant you have. So if you do a checkout flow, you'd also go through the same step. I'm just going to go back a slide. If you do a checkout flow, you'd also go through these same steps of what do you want to have in terms of the checkout? Do you want to really have it simple? What flow should you have? And once you have that flow defined, you will need to connect that to the specific button that is shown on the kiosk. Moving on from there, so we have the button, we have the flow that is attached to the button. Now we need to attach all of that to my kiosk configuration. So to say that this action is only valid for the kiosk that is set up for Italy. For my kiosk that I'm going to set up in Spain, it's going to be different. So I only want to tie it to my Italian kiosk. So what I'm going to do here as a final step is for each module configuration, I'm going to tie that kiosk configuration. And as an admin, I can really determine in which order then those buttons will appear. So we have the check-in, check-out, explore workplace. But if I want, for some reason, I want a check-out button on top, I want the check-in at the bottom, I want explore in the middle, I can have that liberty of defining how is that going to be shown to my visitors on the kiosk. I also have the option to define the type. So the type is going to define the coloring really, or the emphasis on those buttons. When someone will walk up to the kiosk, you really want it to be shown to them of what should they do. If there's too many options available to them, they might get lost. So you might want to say, I want to have my check-in as the highlighted button. So I'm going to have that as a primary button. Checkout, I want that to be, it's not so crucial to me. So I want it just in the normal white, not highlighted. And then explore workplace, I might also want that to have that highlighted. But if I really want to trigger a visitor to take action on something, I want to make sure it's clear to them. So that would also simplify the view to them. And of course, as you're doing this configuration, so you can see this was my initial kiosk, my Italy kiosk. We now went through the discussion of creating the default kiosk check-in with the button, the flow, and then combining it. I would repeat that same process to have the checkout option and the map, so the explore map available on this specific kiosk. So with all of that, I'm now going to move on to the indoor mapping part, really to kind of explain how you could go ahead and configure some of those capabilities, some of the features you want to make available on the map for your employees, but also your visitors. So configuring the indoor map, we have a full experience out here for the admin that can go into Workplace Central, where they can visualize how many kiosks they have that are actually configured, how many kiosks do I have in total, and then how many kiosks that don't have a configuration that is complete then. It can give me information on all my kiosks, so where are they located? Do they have a map tied to them? What map view is being utilized? I'll clarify that in just a minute. Where is that kiosk specifically located? Is it active right now? Is it not active? And what capabilities are available for my employees and visitors? So I mentioned the part of the map view. So the map view is really something, if you're familiar with indoor mapping, we have different views already today. We have a view which is made available to all employees throughout the reservation experience, through the location directory experience, providing the map admin to really configure the map with all the detail they think those personas will be able to utilize. We have another view, which is the scenario planning view, which is utilized mainly for the space planners. So through the Workplace Space Management application, we have an experience for scenario planning where I can actually view the layout of my facility in a really simplified way. So it's removing a lot of the text, really simplifying it for me. And what we've done is create a new view for the kiosk. So you could, of course, use an existing view that you've created for your reservation or something that you already have, but you could also really define this kiosk view. And that goes back to the example I was saying of if I want to have a specific kiosk view, I might want to only on this one use the same map I have throughout all the experiences, but for this view, I want to simplify it. I only want to see waiting area, where's the coffee machine, where's the restroom. Meeting rooms and all of that, I do not want to make available to my visitors. So in my view, I really can configure that. So having done all of that, I then can define my map features. So the map features are really going to be the different capabilities. So do you want to enable anyone to use wayfinding capabilities, open a case, and what kind of filtering, as we saw on that screen, what kind of filtering do I want to make available to everyone? So the configuration of the map will also really depend on who are you delivering the experience to. Visitor management, the clear experiences, as the name says, it's mainly focused on your visitors. But however, the map could be really defined on who you want to make sure the experience is available to. Do you want to have it available to visitors on the reception where they can go ahead and understand the layout, view simple information? Do you want to have it available outside every elevator in your 15-story building for your employees to be able to visualize the full layout, view the occupancy, raise a case, get wayfinding? Really depends on how you want to have it set up. So the experience we showed on that quick picture of what happened at Knowledge, and this was really focused around only having the map available with the information for the personas that really cared about understanding at that time occupancy and the actual real life information. So it was really set up and shown that image of things. So now moving on to looking through, so first of all, some of those map feature configuration. So what you're going to do is for every single kiosk, you can define a different configuration, or you can apply the same configuration to multiple kiosks. So if you want to say, I want all the kiosks I have throughout all my locations, I've maybe got 15 locations, every kiosk on the first floor will have this configuration. All other kiosks will have a different configuration with every possible feature configured. So just to go through the different options of configuration, so the different options of what can be available, we have the actions that can be taken by the employee or the visitor, which is raising a case or wayfinding. So raising a case would require that you have a workplace case management configured, and using the wayfinding capabilities will have to make sure that the map admin, when they create the map, they enable the direction graph. So that is drawing the lines throughout the hallways to make sure the wayfinding is available. I want to point out on this one is that if just based on feedback we've had, if you do configure the wayfinding, make sure that you also enable it both for the default mode and accessible, because having a kiosk implies that you're catering for a large amount of people. You don't necessarily know who specifically is going to walk up to that. So you need to make sure really it's available for everyone that can access that kiosk. Then we have the data visualization part. So here we have all the different options going from displaying the user names on the map, enabling the visualization of those different neighborhoods, looking at your occupancy data. So this, for the occupancy data, you would need workplace connectors as well as integrations to your occupancy sensors. You can also have the reservation data. This would imply that you have access to workplace reservation management, have that experience set up. So having your employees create reservations and being able to view those different states of room directly on that map. And then the space filters is coming from the information on the different space types. So you might want to classify your spaces so you know with certain icons or in certain colors that you've got these, all the blue ones are meeting rooms, all the purple ones are restrooms, or the yellow ones are waiting areas. You can really define that to make it visual, but you also have the labeling to enable that easy filter. So having done those map configuration, those map feature configuration, you can then do the actual map configuration. So as I mentioned, the map part is actually configured within Workplace indoor mapping. If you're familiar with that today, all of this is done through Map Studio. So Map Studio is kind of that one-stop shop where you can go and upload your CAD files, upload your PNG files, configure your map, making sure it becomes from a file to an actual interactive map that someone can go and trigger different actions from. Once you've created those maps in indoor mapping, they will actually show here based on the location where you have defined your kiosk. So it's going to show a specific floor plan based on the way that you've configured it. You can actually select the view. So as I said, we have that brand new view for kiosk. You have the view, the default view, which is the one used throughout the location directory reservation experience. Or you also have the map that is shown throughout the scenario planning experience. So it's going to show the map, it's going to show the building that you selected, but perhaps you want to change floor or change building. You have the option based on where that campus and how the map is set up. You have the option to use the drop-down list to actually select if you want to move it in a different location. So the first step of what you're going to do is when you're configuring the map is really drop a pin. So a simple action of clicking on the map exactly where the kiosk is located. And as you saw during that demo is really defining the location of where that pin is, where that kiosk is really going to impact the rest of the experience, especially if you define that wayfinding experience, as that is taken into account the starting point of any location, of any wayfinding direction that's going to be drawn. It's really important to have it located exactly where that kiosk is physically. So if you move the kiosk, you've already got the configuration set up. You always need to keep in mind that you'll need to make sure that you edit the location on the map to make sure you're not getting any employees or visitors lost of, okay, the kiosk says this map, but I'm looking around, it doesn't look exactly how it shows on the map. Really need to make sure that that is aligned. Once you've done that, so once you've dropped your pin, we have it out of the box. By default, you are here. You could have any kind of naming for that. So you really have the option to configure, customize what you'd like that pin to say. If you want to say in a different language, if you want to have a funny joke on that one or just say kiosk, you can really define what you want. The next part of that map setting is really defining, if you see from picture 1 to picture 2, is how is my map going to open? So when my employee, my visitor clicks on the Explore Workplace, how is the map going to open? You have the option here to use some of the settings to kind of tilt the map, use some of the bearing, some of the pitch to really define how does that map open. Do you want it flat? Do you want it a bit more tilted? Do you want it upright? Really defining, if you're familiar again with Map Studio, you'll know that you can actually do some of those configurations directly in Map Studio, but we also offer here the possibility of doing it. You also have the option of zooming. So you can enlarge the map, make it smaller, really to make sure that when the kiosk is open, the map opens up in the right format. So if you've got a huge kiosk, the map might appear from a distance. So when you set it up in these different settings, you can say, I want it to open full-size screen. I want to make sure it's the right zoom level so that people don't actually have to go and zoom in, because that is going to make more interaction, more clicking on the kiosk. And usually we see that experience is a bit more kind of saccaded. We want to make sure that the experience is very fluid. So that would be guidance on making sure you're setting that up, but also taking into account the kiosk or the actual device you'll be utilizing. Continuing on those map configuration, the next part is really looking at that same piece. Once I've configured my map, I've configured my modules. So I've got the button, I've got the flow. So when it opens up, it opens the map in a certain way that I've configured it. I then need to combine both. The button needs to be combined to the flow, and then the button and the flow need to be combined to my actual device. So this will be the step where I'm actually configuring that specific task. One thing I didn't point out earlier is when we create a specific kiosk, you also have you've probably seen on the screen that small checkbox, the single module mode. So let's say on my kiosk, I only want to have the map. It's directly going to show me the map. It's not going to give me those 3 different patterns. I can really have that single one mode, and it takes me directly to that. So I'm just moving forward, conscious of time. We've went through now the visitor experience. We went through some of the indoor mapping experience. I really want to mention the last step of really how we've now configured all of that. How is that going to now be shown on my kiosk? So the experience now will be, if you remember those 3 roles that I mentioned at the start, we had the kiosk admin that set up all this experience. We're now going to move on to the role of the kiosk operator that's actually going to do some binding between the configurations that have been made and the actual physical kiosk. So this is going to take us to 3 last steps. First step is the kiosk operator is going to log in to the kiosk. So this is taking the browser. If you're familiar with it already, you know that you take the instance, add a slash type kiosk, and that is going to give you the specific URL for the kiosk. This is then going to prompt the kiosk operator with that first page saying, welcome to the kiosk setup. You now have the option to select a specific kiosk. So from there, they can select kiosk. We'll see on the second step, they have to choose between the different kiosks that they have. So the more kiosks you have, the more options you'll have to choose from. So you're probably familiar with what kiosks have been set up. You'll then choose here, I set up all the Italian kiosks. I want to make sure this Italy kiosk is then binded to the actual physical kiosk in Italy. So my operator's taking my Italy kiosk, clicking on continue to have that set up. So this configuration is then binded to this specific kiosk, this iPad, this big kiosk, this Android device, the two are binded. What will happen then is they will log out and then another person will log in, which is a kiosk viewer. So someone has the view kiosk viewer, and this will make the experience available to all. And this will not log them out at any stage unless the kiosk is turned off in case there's a power cut. But this role will actually stay logged in. And as soon as the instance will start to time out, where the kiosk by default will actually ping the instance to say wake up, and it will always stay open. So if you don't turn off your kiosk, if you don't change anything, it will always stay that image, this home screen, until you have a power cut, until you turn off the device. So it will always stay on the same screen, and then anyone can actually walk up and interact with it. You don't have to sign in. I'm an employee, I'm walking up to it. I don't have to sign into it. I'm a visitor. I can do the task to check in or self-register, but that's not going to in any way sign out this specific kiosk viewer from the device. So all of that now saying that we have our kiosk configuration, we have the specific kiosk, both have been binded, and that experience is now available. So that was the high level of the different capabilities that our kiosk can do, and some of the explanation on how you can actually configure some of that experience. So what I want to do now is just check if we have any questions or anything that we missed today that we can also get back to you if we don't have the chance to go through all the different questions.
Hey, Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We do have a couple of questions I was getting through. Maybe we can answer them
Yeah,
live before we
I
close
saw
out on
one
this.
just now on how do you get from kiosk operator to kiosk viewer? So from 2 to 3. So if I just go back one slide since we were just there. Oops. How do I get from 2 to 3? So what I do is I'm a kiosk operator. I've bind them so I continue, and then I have the option to log out. So I would log out, and it would take me back into a login page. And then when I log in as someone that's got that kiosk viewer role, and that would easily display this view for me.
I would say workplace connectors would be the way to get occupancy data at the moment.
In terms of the occupancy sensors, we have a second option of collecting, understanding occupancy. However, this is what I would say higher level, so we're not looking at a specific room. We also have the option within workplace connectors to look at Wi-Fi provider information. So that's collecting information on what devices is connected to the Wi-Fi provider. However, as you probably know, that Wi-Fi provider won't be specific, won't tell me unless the provider is specific to the room, it will tell me someone is present in a specific area, on a specific floor. So we're losing a bit of that precision. But if you're looking at that occupancy, other than the occupancy sensors, I would also recommend looking at some of the things you already might have in your meeting rooms. You might have some of those Zoom technology where you can actually also capture information on that. But the way we have it today, the way we offer it is usually via occupancy sensors. Of course, again, if you want more information on that, if you want specifics to your license or specific use case that you have in mind, if you want to reach out to us via email, and we can really detail it based on the use case that you want to put together. And I think that brings us to time. I just wanted to quickly mention a quick two FAQ questions that usually come back frequently. One of them is really what happens when a user doesn't use the kiosk for a few seconds, or they've started something, or the kiosk is about to time out. What happens? We have a system property where you can actually really define how many seconds do you want to have before it reverts back to that home page. So you can say, if they haven't touched it in 60 seconds, go back to the home page. If they haven't touched it in 20 seconds, you're really strict on, you don't want anyone to see any information that someone might have left. 20 seconds. You can really define that in that property. And then in terms of multi-language, because I also saw a question in Q&A, we have the option to set one default language, but then of course, based on what you have set up in your instance, you can define what languages will be shown as options that a user can actually select from. So having said all of that, I want to thank everyone for joining the session today. If you have any questions, please do reach out to us via the email address we provided, or if you have Paulina and I's personal emails, you can definitely reach out and we can get back to you and discuss further if needed some of the requirements or use cases that you'd like to put in place. Also, if you're actively implementing, have use cases, have features that you don't see today available in the kiosk, let us know. We really want to know how you're doing, how you're going along with the configuration, how we can enhance the experience. Because as I said, this is something we're investing in because we understand that the workplace is not just about the employees, the agents, it's also about the brand image you're giving to your visitors and the experience you're providing. So any feedback, comments would be more than welcome to us.